Welcome to an edition of Dead Air Live. I'm Kathleen Powers, the editor of the Somerville Journal. Tonight we'll be speaking with and answering questions, or asking questions of the candidates for Alderman at Large. If I could start with the candidates actually introducing themselves.
Hello, I'm Helen Carter. I'm currently the chairman of the Somerville Democratic City Committee. I'm a former Alderman at Large, former president of the Board of Aldermen. Currently, I'm working on the Living Wage Committee. I've been very active in that. I'm on the board of Somerville Community Corporation and Somerville Cambridge Elder Services. I'm hoping to be elected to the Board of Aldermen so that I can continue the work that I've been doing in the city and spread it out into other ways. I hope that you will listen to the questions here and the answers, and perhaps my answer will give you a reason to vote for me. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Bill White, currently Alderman at Large, serving as Vice President of the Board of Aldermen. And just to be brief, I'm running basically on my record of accomplishments over the last 4 years. The voters will be receiving a number of pieces of literature highlighting those, but what I'd like the voters to keep in mind is basically two things. One is in Somerville right now, landlords have a 30% residential exemption. We're the only community in Massachusetts that has that, and it saves taxpayers hundreds of dollars every year, which in turn is hopefully passed on to renters as well, keeping rents low in the community, or lower than they otherwise would have been with some of the tax increases that we've had. And the second thing I like to stress is development at Assembly Square. You're going to hear that as a big issue. Today, in fact, I met with one of the developers who has a proposal for $750 million of development at Assembly Square. It will almost double our commercial tax base. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Joe Curtatone. I'm a lifelong resident of the city of Somerville. I'm currently finishing my third term as Alderman at Large. I've served as president and vice president and represented the Board of Aldermen as ex officio to the school committee. I look forward to serving you again in the future, to continue to fight for your tax dollars, to help improve the quality of life in our schools and our neighborhoods.
Hello, I'm Denise Provo, Alderman at Large. Haven't yet served out the whole of my first 2-year term on the board, but as I think many of you know, I've worked hard in that time and hope to continue to do so. I'm looking forward this week to seeing my first crosswalk that I sponsored painted and striped. And since it takes almost 2 years to get a crosswalk done, I've developed the philosophy that I'm going to need to persevere in city government in order to accomplish much. And in order to do so, I'm running for re-election. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Joyce the Voice. I'm new to elected office. I've been a resident of Somerville for 10 years, and I've watched a lot of changes in the community. I've been amazed at the growth and the development and the diversity of the community, and I've been involved in helping in some campaigns in the past, national and state and also on the local level. And it occurred to me that maybe this time it was my turn to see if there was something I could add to the mix. I don't have this kind of experience that my esteemed colleagues have because I haven't been in public office, but I do bring to this potential a variety of life and work experiences in administration, in teaching. I'm a qualified teacher. I've taught French and English. I've been a substitute at the high school. And I would just like to offer a new voice, a voice that might listen to some of your concerns. So I'd like you to consider me for one of your 4 votes.
Good evening. My name is Bruce Desmond, and I'm a candidate for Alderman at Large in Somerville. I live on Summer Street. I'm a homeowner. I live with my wife Barbara and our 4 children. I'm a former school committee member, 4 years on the school committee, 1 year as chairman, former PTA president at the Kennedy School, and former chairman of the Mayor's Task Force on Community Services. I've got a vested interest in this city. I always have and I always will. And it's my intention that if elected to the Board of Aldermen, I can serve the city and those services that they need so desperately much better. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Alderman at Large Joe Favaloro. I have a firm philosophy. There's no greater service than the public service, and have spent a lifetime accomplishing it. for the past 25 years as a public activist, as a department head in Mayor Bruin's administration, as a member of a planning board here in the city of Somerville, as an administrator in a quasi-governmental agency, as a 3-term school committee member, chairman also, and now as an alderman at large. I've committed giving of myself to the public. I would like, with your continued support, to stay on the Board of Aldermen so I can work on the many issues that are before us to make Somerville as good as it can be.
Thank you, candidates. Each of the candidates will have 4 questions that I will ask them with the same time to answer each of those questions. We'll start with Bill White. Rents are out of this world. How do we make Somerville affordable for families?
Well, having served as chair of the Committee on Housing and Community Development and also as the representative of the Affordable Housing Task Force, a lot of energy has been spent on this issue, and there are a couple of things that come to mind. One way to help create affordable housing is through the use of federal funds as leverage to assist nonprofit and private developers. We have an example of that in Linden Street, where ground is in the process of being broken, and that will create 42 units. Another area is the city government working as a liaison with landlords, for instance, who do not actually rent properties. We've done studies where it indicates that a large number of seniors especially are concerned with renting properties. So what we're proposing is to have the city act as a liaison, educating the landlords on their rights and responsibilities, as well as tenants, and trying to act as a clearinghouse to bring them together. That would open up a large number of units. So those are 2 I see now at Assembly Square. We're in the process of selling Yard 21, which was bought with federal block grant money. There will be a profit made in that, and that federal block grant money can be used for affordable housing. So I'm also looking forward to seeing how the administration plans on using it and lobbying to have some of those funds used for affordable housing. The last thing is, actually, I've been speaking with brokers, and with the current economic environment, rents are dropping in the city, and there's an inventory. What I would like to see is, again, a liaison between the city, the housing authority, and landlords explaining the benefits of Section 8. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and for a long time, Somerville residents have not been able to use their Section 8 certificates in the city because of the high rents and landlords not wanting them. Now, with the change in the economic climate, I think it would behoove the city to try to lock in as many of those units as possible into the Section 8 program.
A quick follow. With elder landlords renting apartments, how do you get them to rent apartments?
Well, what you do is you educate them on the benefits that they would have in helping families out, for instance, who are looking for housing. A lot of seniors don't realize that their families out there, for instance, looking for housing. So you educate them in that. You also provide them with information that they may need in renting, and you also work to convince them of the benefits of the program and acting as a mediator, for instance, if there are any problems later on that develop with tenants, because a lot of landlords are concerned that they may have tenants. So if you do a screening process first and then act as a mediator, I think what it would do is take away the concern maybe of some seniors for renting.
I'm sorry, I've got to call time. Joe Curtatone, how do we make Somerville affordable for families?
I had the experience of being a renter myself, so I understand the dilemma some people are going through, and I know a lot of my colleagues can attest. The phone calls we get most often is people being forced out of their homes. A home's been purchased with the high market sales price on homes, and either seniors mostly are being forced out because they can't afford the new rents. There's not one solution. This is a regional and a national problem. We have a lot of the tools here in Somerville. We adopted a new inclusionary and linkage ordinances in the city, and Bill talked a little bit about the Assembly Square Yard 21 proposal, which, one proposal would bring in more than $5 million for affordable housing. What I'd like to see us to do is continue to work with our Community Development Corporation. We have a very, very active CDC. We saw a culmination of that today on the groundbreaking of the Linden Street project. We'll add 42 affordable units to the city of Somerville. The problem is the housing stock around the nation, and just focus around this region, has dwindled so much. There's a very low housing stock, and how do you create more housing stock? Well, we need direct resources. We need to build our commercial tax base so we can have more of those linkage and inclusionary units, linkage fees and inclusionary units into our Affordable Housing Trust Fund to help create more affordable units. What Bill spoke to is some of the federal money. The Linden Street project took advantage of some state resources in the new State Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which is a $100 million commitment over 5 years to help create those units. We need to continue to work with developers and the CDC to help seek development opportunities to create a housing stock in Somerville. And I think we really have to start working with our neighbors and surrounding communities to address it as a regional problem. When we're talking about some of the water and sewer problems and the outdated sewer systems in the area, we sat down with other communities. We need to do the same on affordable housing.
You've mentioned Yard 21. How can one development like that affect the housing problem?
It's the potential mixed-use development. We're fortunate enough to have two good proposals on the Yard 21 down in Assembly Square. A very dense mixed-use development that falls within the requirements of the RFP would bring in the type of linkage fees and inclusionary units, would add housing units to the housing stock, also bringing money off the linkage fees by creating certain type of development, which that money would go directly into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
Well, you're up next. How do we make Somerville affordable for families?
Well, some of the things that my colleagues have spoken of, many of which were recommendations that came from the study that the Affordable Housing Task Force did, are things which are widely acknowledged to be true. The Community Development Corporation has brought a number of new units online, and in a lot of ways they're better situated than the city as developers of housing, although the city through its Affordable Housing Trust Fund can certainly collect and channel money as seed money for affordable projects. I think it's also true that this is a regional problem and that there are some regional solutions in sight. The state has actually enacted a sort of an enhanced anti-snob zoning that applies in the suburbs that requires communities that don't have at least 10% affordable housing to increase their stock of affordable housing. And there's a program by which the state itself can grant permits for the building of housing in communities where the local governments are balking at the permitting process. That will increase the supply regionally. Another thing that's happening regionally is that MAPC is encouraging some of the suburban communities that have large minimum lot sizes and a lot of big houses that are now home to empty nesters. They're encouraging cities and towns to do what has been done in Somerville and make multiple dwelling units of single-family houses. So a number of communities have adopted these model ordinances that allow accessory units. So that is something which over time is going to add to the supply regionally and take some of the stress off Somerville.
You mentioned the Somerville Community Corporation. How much should they how much of this should they pick up?
Well, they have done a lot. Community development corporations regionally have probably developed the bulk of the affordable housing that isn't done by housing authorities. There are a few other mechanisms. On the North Shore, Salem, I think, has actually a land trust which develops affordable housing. There are mechanisms that can be used, and some creativity can bring new units to the market.
Joyce the Voice, the question goes to you. How do we make Somerville affordable for families?
I agree with most of the suggestions. I have not had the opportunity to immerse myself in as much depth, so I absolutely cannot speak with the same authority as my colleagues who have been working in the field. But one of the things that occurs to me is that not only in our city, but in neighboring communities, a lot of the housing is taken up by the students who go to the schools, the universities. And I don't know that it would be possible to work with the universities and try to get them to be more responsible and to create more housing, which would then alleviate some of the housing that could be available. I know one of the proposals, I think it's for the 21, I forget, parcel 21, was by Habitat, and they spoke about this kind of potential, making the housing available for graduate students and married students. And I think that's a very creative solution, because that would, immediately relieve a lot of the burden. Another thing is, I think there might be a possibility of making incentives for landlords to upgrade their property and make it more environmentally friendly, putting in solar panels, putting in retrofitting, and giving them an incentive to do that, working with perhaps the federal government and the state government, and making that some of that housing affordable. If they have more than 2 units or 4 units, we could, you know, sit down and figure out what makes sense to do, but make it a win-win situation. If they'll improve their property and keep it affordable, then they get some benefit to improve the property long term.
How does making a apartment or dwelling or unit or set of units environmentally friendly, how does that help the housing crisis?
Well, what I'm suggesting is that if they're willing to do that, which would alleviate some of the burden on utilities, that's a big issue in the community, then maybe we could find a way to link that and subsidize it so that the rents could be lower. Those landlords would receive credits or a benefit for improving their property, which would lower utility costs, which would be environmentally friendly, and would also keep the, you know, make the units available at a lower rate. That would be like the trade-off.
Bruce Desmond, how do we make Somerville affordable for families?
Well, it's certainly not an easy task, and it's a problem that's not just in Somerville. It's statewide, nationwide. And a lot of it is caused by just the inflation that's taking place. The water has increased about 17%. The cost of water, gas and electricity prices are skyrocketed, and all those costs get passed through a landlord down to the tenant. It'd be nice if we could get some type of incentive for these utility companies. One, to provide power would be nice once in a while, but secondly, to maybe give some kind of a break to multifamily units where there is families that need affordable housing, and that may decrease some of the cost. There's always the linkage, federal funds, state funds we have to take more advantage of, and there's good legislation now. I believe 40B, what Denise Provost was referring to, 40B is now in the, I believe it's in the Senate, and that will give the city more leeway as far as dealing with what takes place with affordable housing in the city.
What incentives would you give to the utilities to give landlords and homeowners a break?
Well, the utilities are making, I know the electric company, NSTAR, is making record profits right now, and they've even outcast into the fact that they own RCN. And they're spending an awful lot of their time installing RCN equipment rather than taking care of the maintenance problems that should be taken care of. I think what we have to do is allow them the convenience of working on, it's a government regulated industry, so if they want to go take part in the RCN and the communication business, we have to make sure that they're dealing with the problem of providing energy and being a member of our community, which I don't believe they are. So I think it's not so much an incentive for them, but just a matter of being part of the community.
Joe Favaloro, how do we make Somerville affordable for families?
I think first and foremost, it's not just a Somerville issue, as others have stated, is that we need to get the state and the federal government back into reinvesting in their communities. Without their financial support, our ability to put a dent in the issue is going to be almost impossible. On the local side, clearly we have linkage funds. Linkage funds only come in as development comes in, so we need to work to create an environment where we can find responsible development for our city so our city can grow and therefore create some linkage funds for us. But the other part of it that the city can begin to do is maybe begin to think outside of the box. Maybe providing tax incentives for landlords under strict guidance if they provide affordable units for tenants so that they have an incentive to provide that unit and maintain it. Also, there's been programs throughout the city that have been very active as it relates to providing landlords incentives to rebuild and restructure their apartments to make them good, sound units and then make them affordable for the tenants living in them. These programs need to be looked at and expanded at so that we can maybe begin to put a dent in it. The other part of this is really beginning to put a marketing on Section 8 vouchers. I want to credit the Housing Authority, who's just recently gone out with a program to get Somerville people back into the voucher program, to move them to the top of the list, and then to market them to get that a unit matched up with an individual with the voucher. That program can put a lot of families in apartments that they need. But it's a marketing tool that needs to be put in place to convince landlords to work with tenants and to convince landlords to work with the city in order to find those units for people.
As an alderman, how would you get the state and the feds involved?
Well, again, one of the greatest tools that we have is the power of our voice, and that voice is multiplied tenfold and 100-fold and 1,000-fold by a strong message that we all send to our legislative delegations on the state side, our congressional delegations on the federal side, to begin to work with them to identify programs that are available, how they can be expanded, to send messages to HUD, who is the principal agency in the country, to start putting these programs back in place.
Helen Corrigan, the question goes to you. How do we make Somerville affordable for families?
Well, as you've seen by the rest of the answers, it's a real serious problem, one that does not have any easy answers. I've been involved in the affordable housing issue for a long time as a member of the board of Somerville Community Corporation. We just recently opened an affordable housing development on Wheatland Street, and as someone mentioned, ground was broken today on Linden Street for 42 units, but that's just a drop in the bucket. The sad thing about this is people who grew up in this city mostly want to stay here, and they've just been priced out of the market. As Alderman Curtatone, I believe, mentioned, the market is changing a little, but the rents are still very high. We need to work with our legislators, with our state representatives, our state senator, and with our congressmen and our U.S. senators, because it is such a big problem. I think that landlords who rent at reasonable prices should get tax credits. I would like to see a program instituted where the city actually searches for people who are living in two-family houses and keeping their apartments empty. Some people do that just because they don't want to be bothered with a tenant. I know that the Somerville Community Corporation tried to search those people out and were minimally successful. I think the city could do a better job in the census and perhaps find available places. I would like to see affordable housing at Assembly Square. I think it's a perfect spot for it, and we could have a lot of units there. Another thing, because of the rents are so high, I would like to see the amount that people get in their Section 8 vouchers raised. As far as I know, it has not been increased in a long time, and rents have gone up probably threefold since the price of that was
If I
set.
can follow up. If you do have affordable housing at Assembly Square, does that create a kind of slum with lots of buildings around it and kind of an isolated community?
Not if there's a T-stop there.
Very good. Great. Well, the next question then goes to Joe Curtatone. As a member of the Board of Aldermen, you elect a president to sit on the school committee. You approve school funding. Are we getting the best from Somerville schools?
I actually had the honor of sitting as ex officio, the representative of the Board of Aldermen, the school committee. I always used to say, I'm never satisfied. We're the best for what we fund them for. We're always seeking, and the school committee is always seeking more funds, and we as elected officials on the Board of Aldermen want to give them funds. I don't recall the Board of Aldermen ever denying a request from the school committee as far as funding requests. The program in the school department has improved greatly. What I pride myself on is the fact that I was able to work with the school committee to participate actively with the Board of Aldermen in the past budgeting process, and to help them put together their goals and objectives over the next 5 years and their capital plan goals and objectives, to work with the Board of Aldermen and to outline how their funding demands are going to shape up over the next 5 years. Are we getting the best out of it? We're not satisfied with where we are. Have some of the schools improved? Absolutely. We have a very active school committee. We have a very good superintendent. And what we need to do and strive more to do, and I know the school committee is doing this, and I've spoken to the superintendent many times, is to get parents more involved in the school system. Let them have a voice. They want to have a say in a choice in their children's future, and I think that's very important. While I served as ex officio on the school committee for the Board of Aldermen, I was happy to say we were able to get more parental involvement in the selection of the new high school headmaster at that time, was now Thomas Gallegani. There were some parents who wanted other headmasters, but the point was we had more parents involved and more students involved. I think we need to strive for that atmosphere. The solution is not just in funding. We need more funding, yes. We need more funding to bring schools up to parity to some of the new schools like the New Kennedy, the West Somerville, and the Healy. The high school needs expansion and improvement. We're able to add more funding on the Board of Aldermen side and work with the school committee to bring the technology level up to a parity level in other schools. We need to continue to do that and continue to move forward. The school committee has put forward their ideas and their goals and objectives for the next 3 to 5 years, and we need to continue to work with them to help meet those goals and objectives.
How much money do the schools need?
Is there a dollar figure, flat figure? I don't think there's ever a flat figure. The schools need more money every year. These costs are going up. A large part of the school budget is salaries, as is the city side. So besides meeting salary objectives to help attract the best and most qualified teachers, we need money for direct programming for our students. So there's no top line figure. We have to strive to get as much funding we can. And for a city like Somerville, when we talked about commercial development, that's why we need to have more commercial development, because we're heavily dependent on state aid. And with the rollback in the state tax level, as we saw recently, that could jeopardize some of the funding. So we have to continue to try to attract that quality commercial development so we can have more money for our schools.
Denise Provost, are we getting the best from Somerville schools?
Well, my view of most things is that there are few things which couldn't use some improvement. I'll certainly say from personal experience as a parent that the Somerville schools, I believe, are better than the reputation that they have in some quarters. I think that it's certainly possible for children to get a very fine education in the Somerville schools. There are a lot of wonderful teachers. I think it's not just a question of dollars. What the school system needs is more vision, needs to keep improving its leadership. I think at the entry level end, we need to be more competitive with salaries to hire the best teachers. I think we're a bit heavy on the administrative end. I think there are certainly adjustments that can be made that will get more from the dollars that we spend.
You say we need vision. Who provides that?
Well, it's everyone at every level of leadership, certainly the superintendent, the headmasters, and principals. It starts at the top, but there are multiple tops in every school and within the system as a whole. There are people in leadership positions, and I think that as more and more of those are inspired and inspiring people who have clear educational goals and ideas about how to bring variety and creativity and real choice and real parental involvement into education, that schools within the system become competitive with each other. That's the idea of magnet schools that was developed a few years under this controlled choice program, and which hasn't really come to much. The schools are really pretty homogeneous. But if schools were able to develop their own educational philosophies, then I think you would get a real marketplace of ideas, and that families would respond to that.
Thank you. Joyce the Voice, are we getting the best from Somerville schools?
Well, I have a perspective from having been a teacher. I was a substitute teacher last year at Somerville High School. And during that period of time, I had the opportunity to feel the energy in the school and to learn from the teachers some of their concerns and to also hear the students. There are a lot of things about the school, I believe, that are working well. It's a real challenge in a community that has the most diverse. You want to world nations, you walk into Somerville High School. You have every language possible being spoken, and to put all of these different communities together in a classroom situation, in a building that's woefully, in need of repair, I think they're doing pretty well, but there needs to be absolutely there needs to be something done about the whole air conditioning, heating. There's no air conditioning. It's a real horror. If you tried to work, I mean, we're in hot lights now. Imagine toward the end of the semester when if the teachers don't have fans. I mean, that's one of the physical plant things that needs to be addressed. There needs to be more support for the teachers. I think that's from the administration level down. And I think they need to utilize school aides in a better way to reduce the workload for the teachers so that teachers can focus on teaching. And sometimes the aides are there, but they're taken away. So I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but I've learned from the teachers that that's really a problem. This is a very simple thing, the time between classes, 4 minutes. You try to get from one end of Somerville High School to the opposite end down to the basement, which I had to do. It's a nightmare. So I don't know how that could be worked out, but I would recommend that as a change for getting more out of the school day for the students and the teachers, for them not to be frazzled. I think that the thing that I would like to do, if I had the opportunity, is to try to be a bridge between the school committee and the voters and see what we could do to generate focus on what is good and
I've got to
what
cut
could
you
be
off
good.
here. If I could just follow up, you say that there's so many kids from so many places. Are we adequately serving all those kids?
I don't know that I would be able to answer that honestly with the short amount of experience that I have. I think that they're doing a very good job of trying. But probably more needs to be done. I know it's a difficulty getting teachers in certain areas, and that's country, around the country, because of the influx of people with different, from different countries. So,
The question goes to Bruce Desmond. Are we getting the best from Somerville's schools?
I don't think you can ever be satisfied with the type of education your children get. It's too important. I believe that there are a lot of fantastic things that go on in the Somerville school system, from the administration right down through the teachers into the classroom. I spent 4 years on the school committee, so I'm very familiar with the problems that exist as far as capital problems, which we took care of when I was on the school committee. Some remain today. I think if you really want to improve education, the only true way you're going to do it is to reduce the size of the classroom down to a number that's like 13. I think we're at 19 now. That's an expensive proposition, but if you want to keep pace with the wealthier communities in their schools and the private schools that we constantly get compared to, that's what you have to do. We have many more problems to deal with in an urban school setting than they do in towns that we get compared to, and I don't think that that's fair. I think we have an excellent staff here. I think they all work hard. The thing that worries me the most is that I'm afraid now that they're going to start changing their curriculums to feed this MCAS craze that's going on, and I think that more than anything will hurt our school system.
You mentioned in an answer to an earlier question that with utilities we could perhaps give landlords a break. Can we raise taxes to help pay for lower class sizes?
I think education, it's necessary to raise taxes at some point for education. I believe we also have to find other ways to deal with it. It's a difficult problem, but if you really want the education that people are clamoring for, you're going to have to pay for a reduced class size and a better student-teacher ratio.
Joe Favallara, are we getting the best from Somerville schools?
I think you're never satisfied, as others have said, but always need to strive for excellence. That is the key point as you're looking at education. I spent 6 years on the school board and saw many changes that evolved over that period of time. Probably the single largest accomplishment in that period was back in 1994 when we did put a controlled choice plan in place that allowed us to keep neighborhood schools, to put magnet themes in place, but provided us with the resources, 90% state funding, that has allowed us to do new schools at the West Somerville Neighborhood School, the Healy School, the Kennedy School, the new early education center down at Glen Park. We also have plans on the table for Lincoln Park Community School, and we have begun the discussion as Joyce talked about, of making the necessary renovations at the high school and maybe even doing an addition at the high school as well. But that's one part of it. But you continue striving for excellence. You need to continue working on curriculum. You need to continue to create leadership institutes for your faculty to provide them with all the resources they need. You need to involve parents, because the parents are the backbone of the school system. My wife served for 6 years as the PTA president down at the East Somerville Community School. I'm active in the PTA as well. They need to be active and involved as well. All of these pieces together will get you to a school system that continues to get better. Will it get, all the way to where you want to go? Maybe never, but you need to strive to try to get there. And just to pick up on a point that you asked about raising taxes, there's nothing more important in a community than providing quality education for every child. If it means raising taxes at some point in time, I think you put it on the table and you do it, because it's that important.
As an alderman, how do you provide that leadership for the schools?
Well, I think leadership starts from the top. I think the most important decision, it was interesting. I served pre-educational reform and post-educational reform. As it stands right now, the real power of the school board is really choosing that superintendent. So it's the superintendent that sets the tempo and develops that spirit of leadership and develops the plan and the ideas that works itself all the way through the system.
Helen Corrigan, are we getting the best from Somerville schools?
I think for the amount of money we spend, it's amazing what we get. I talked to some young people who, mostly immigrants, kids who have to go out and work after school, and they tell me the colleges they're going to when they graduate. When I look at the graduation list and see where the kids from Somerville schools are going on to, I think it's very impressive. So I think the schools are doing a good job, but I don't think we are spending enough money. The class sizes are too big. Any of the teachers I talk to, that is their major complaint. Now, when you see the class sizes published in Boston Magazine, that's a very deceptive number, because we have some classes that are real small, some special ed classes that only have a few children in them. Meanwhile, the schools throughout the city are bigger than they should be. I wonder, Joe talked about involvement of parents. I wonder where the schools would be without the involvement that is there. PTAs have to have fundraisers to raise money for outside programs for the kids. There is not enough money spent on the schools. When I was on the Board of Aldermen, I always voted for everything in the school committee budget, and I think that's probably true of anybody on the board. They understand that this is the most important place we can spend our money, because these kids are the future of this country. And so I do think that for what we have, we are getting the best. But I think we need more money to do what should be done.
Other than where children go to college, what are the other benchmarks that you're looking for in the schools?
Well, the MCAS. I agree with whoever said we shouldn't be teaching to a test, but we do have to have some kind of guidelines for when kids get out of school, that they graduate with certain amount of knowledge. And statewide, evidently, it hasn't been happening. So we do have to have some kind of test that says, yes, you're ready to leave.
Bill White, are we getting the best from Somerville schools?
Well, even if we were, I wouldn't necessarily say it, because you always want to have a goal out there that people are shooting for, and you always want to prod them to do better. I will say that there's a substantial difference from the school system from when I graduated let's say just a few years ago. But one of the things I think that is important is what Alderman Favoloro said, and that is after ed reform, there is a great amount of power resident in the hands of the superintendent. And I think all aldermen who were here have always voted for the school committee budget since I've been on the board. So does that mean you sort of like give up and wring your hands? No, there are certain areas where we can provide substantial help to the school department. And I think one area is in vocational education. When, when the Somerville High School was consolidated with the Trade High School in the 80s, there was a state-of-the-art vocational facility there. Any Somerville High student who came out of there as a graduate had the top-of-the-line knowledge necessary. From what I've been told, it is now falling behind the times, and there is a substantial need to upgrade those vocational facilities. And we're dealing now in the Board of Aldermen with a 5-year plan. Alderman Curtatone was chair of the committee this year. I was chair last year. And one of the things I think we're going to push is to move the funding necessary for vocational education to the forefront, because a large segment of Somerville students could really benefit and should benefit by that. And I'm a bit concerned because I don't know what the fallback is going to be, but we've heard about the Holman's building. Originally, the concept was floated that the Holman's building would be used as part of the reconstruction of Somerville High School and its upgrade, that as you knock down like one section, the students would be at the Holman's building, and then as a new section was built, they would switch around. Now that we're going to use that as the new City Hall annex, basically, the plans are on hold for Somerville High School, and that is a very important item that, as an alderman, if I'm successful in being president next year and serving on the school committee, that I will definitely stress as an item of priority.
Where would you put the vocational program if you don't have the Homans building?
Well, no, it would be within the high school. You have to work out a plan to somehow do the renovations without the benefit of the Homans building. And we've not yet seen a formal concrete plan to deal with it that way.
Okay. All right, the next round of questions starts with Denise Provost. Development has been the word of the year. When you are elected to the Board of Aldermen, what will be the future of Assembly Square?
Well, when I am re-elected, the near future of Assembly Square is actually in the hands of the Somerville Redevelopment Authority, because it's still an urban renewal site officially, as it was designated in the 70s, and it's the Redevelopment Authority that's going to choose the successful bidder for Yard 21. As one of my colleagues stated previously, we have two very competitive, attractive proposals to redevelop Yard 21 that involve more cash than the city paid for the parcel. We paid $6 million. I believe one developer is offering 8.8 and another 12 million, a commitment to create an orange line stop and hundreds of millions of dollars of high-value mixed-use development that would make use of the orange line stop and create a medium high-density urban neighborhood in what's previously been an underutilized and isolated area. I think that whatever development scheme is chosen for Yard 21 is going to pretty much dictate the way the rest of Assembly Square is going to be redeveloped, which will be, as with Yard 21, by folks in the private sector. The city certainly set the standard by putting in the kinds of requirements that everyone agreed on were necessary for Assembly Square. Public transportation, fairly high density of mixed-use development, and I think that the likelihood is more promising than it's ever been that we're going to see those things there.
How important is public transportation to that area?
Well, it's crucial to the whole city, and it's especially important to Assembly Square because there are millions of dollars in transit infrastructure there which are not being utilized by the city of Somerville. The expensive part of any transit system is the right-of-ways and the tracks, the hardware. And we even have trains on these lines. Putting in stations and stops on the existing Orange Line and even on the commuter rail lines is relatively low investment. And I know 2 years ago, when Dennis Del Zolio, who's had just taken over as the new director of planning for the MBTA, addressed the Association for Public Transportation, which is one of the organizations where I serve on the board of directors. He said that the focus of the T was going to be on improving areas where there was already a big investment in transit. So Assembly Square will give the MBTA a lot of bang for the buck.
All right. Joyce the Voice, what is the future of Assembly Square?
I hope it's going to be a development that will reconnect that part of Somerville with the rest of Somerville, because I know when I first started to go over there, it was the most bizarre thing how to figure out how to get there. For somebody that doesn't know, it was like somebody made a maze. So that would be one thing. I'd like to see it reconnected. I agree with Denise in many aspects that true land mixed development, which means that you have a 24-hour environment. You don't have everybody leaving after the workday so that it's like a dead place. You have people living there, affordable housing, you have parking structures that don't take up, large spaces of asphalt, that you take the benefit of the waterfront. I think that's really important to extend the bike path to see that there's ways for people to get there through the bikes. Absolutely the Orange Line. For Somerville, the most densely populated community, to not have the transportation with the infrastructure already there is outrageous. And the political will and energy from the Board of Aldermen is really critical. And I think the Mystic View Task Force, the citizen group, was absolutely critical in the whole process of bringing forward ideas that were progressive and saying to Somerville, you may have thought one way in the past, but this is the future, and we don't have to accept second best or third best. We're not just a low-collar working-class community. We're a community with very vibrant people, with artists, with professors, with teachers, and we want to look at something with pride. This is the last big opportunity we have to do something really fabulous. So I hope it's a fabulous place, and I know it takes a lot of energy to make all those decisions, and it's a little risky. You have to have faith that something can happen if the money isn't thrown at you right at the front, to do something that will be short-term, maybe beneficial, but not long-term. And so I would really like to see it to be so exciting that everybody wants to go there.
You say it's risky. How much, what should the city be willing to risk? Are there particular projects that you have in mind?
I think the city should be willing to balance the needs of immediate tax dollars because of a developer saying, I'm going to give this to you, when we know that those developers, when they go into other communities and those original plans have been rejected, they came forward with better plans because they saw the political will of the community. And I think that's the kind of risk we have to say, okay, we're willing to see ourselves in a future that's more positive.
Bruce Desmond, what is the future of Assembly Square?
Well, I think that there's an exciting future ahead for Assembly Square. Going back and looking at the process that took place, there was an extremely fair process that went on. We got an awful lot of public input, great input that was listened to. Changes were made. Developers came back with plans that adhered to what the thinking of the community was. And now, as we've been told this evening, there are two excellent plans on the table that the city can begin with immediately to kind of spearhead the whole development process. The problem that exists is that I believe the window of opportunity may be closing. The worse the economy gets, the more possible it is for developers to back away from spending money in Assembly Square, and I believe that's what we have to guard against. What I would like to see is the Yard 21 development have a decision be made as soon as possible and put a shovel in the ground and start building out there. And I think the other developers will follow along with that lead from the city.
Which development plans should get the shovels in the ground?
Well, it should be Yard 21, should be first. And from that, whether it's the tourist group can follow suit and come in and begin their process right away. If it's in court that's holding up that process now, I'm not sure where that stands, but I believe part of this is in the courts. It would behoove the whole city to alleviate that part of it and allow these developers to come in and start working.
Joe Favaloro, what will be the future of Assembly Square?
Prior to joining the board, I was on the Assembly Square Task Force, and probably one of the most in-depth processes for traffic and planning and all of those components to come up with a vision for Assembly Square. In my first 4 months as a member of the Board of Aldermen, every meeting was totally taken over with the important discussion of what Assembly Square should look like. And when it all came to pass, the board put together a plan that called for a multi-use project with waterfront open space that invites the Orange Line extension, which is critical. And those are all key components to a site that can survive the good economies and the bad economies. I heard a dozen times in the course of all of the community debates about we should stick with what Telecom City did in Medford. They didn't back down. They didn't let the will of others get in the way of it. They said they wanted this, and that's what they got. Well, if you saw the Globe a few weeks ago, 5 years after the start of Telecom City, not one tenant, not one project. And the reason it's not happening, based on, not my words, the Boston Globe, is you need a development that's economy safe, both good and bad economy, a mix of uses. Today, you know, you said, what's the future of Assembly Square? Well, short term, it's zero. Because of litigation, because of being held up, there's no linkage money coming in. There's no mitigation dollars coming in. There's no tax revenue coming in. And every day we wait, there's less and less likelihood that the plan we really want to see will be the plan we'll actually get because the economy won't allow it to happen. So I think we need to move forward on the plan that was adopted by, first by the CISO group and then by the Board of Aldermen and is ready to go.
How did the Board of Aldermen take the leadership on this?
Well, Kat, I wish there was an easy answer to that. I think the leadership that we've taken is putting the plan together. It's there. We've articulated it at public forums, obviously as of this evening, around the horseshoe. I think the community at large is behind that mixed-use plan. However, again, any individual, any component of individuals has a right to go into through the legal courts. That's where we're at right now. I mean, I for one, I'm not going to tell someone not to file a lawsuit, but reality is at some point in time you need to move forward. We need to move forward now.
Helen Corrigan, what will be the future of Assembly Square?
Well, my vision is basically the same as the Mystic View Task Force. I know that there have been many plans put forward. I have never seen such community force as that task force has generated. People have put so much into that. I would like to see green space down there. I would like to see, as I mentioned before, affordable housing, some retail. I really don't want to see big box developments down there. And I think we can look for the long term. Yes, we could use the money now, but I think everything that the city does should be based on the long-term good of the people in the city, as opposed to a quick fix vis-a-vis linkage funds. They will come when the developers build, and the economy is not what it was. I think there's a big difference between what's been proposed down there and Telecom City, because that's a market that has totally collapsed. We still need retail stores. We still need affordable housing. I'm sure we still need office space. I hope that's what happens there.
When you say you endorse Mystic View, there are some who blame Mystic View for dragging down the process with lawsuits and other tactics. What is your opinion?
Again, my understanding is that is one individual. Okay. It's not the Mystic View Task Force. And I don't know every detail of their plan. The overall picture is what I like. To have it with as many people able to get affordable housing as possible, as many retail establishments as could fit in there comfortably, and with some green space.
All right. Thank you. Bill White.
Yes.
If you are elected, what will be the future of Assembly Square?
Well, having been elected and having served 2 terms and being intimately involved in Assembly Square, I can vouch that the future is fine. People don't recall when I was first elected in 1997, Assembly Square was not even on anybody's radar maps. It was not really considered as a place for development. And what we were presented with was a strip mall and a 320,000 square foot furniture store that would have been surrounded by parking lots. The value of that would have probably been about $150 million and would have taken up a large portion of the site and basically directed low-scale development on the remainder. I proposed zoning amendment that basically led to the development of the plan. Alderman Curtatone supported me on that, and we both spoke at a number of public hearings on it, and we were able to get the developers to the table to lead to what culminated in the Cecil plan, which I had some problems with. But then the second step was to enact comprehensive zoning, which in fact requires mixed use. It was an amendment of mine that was adopted that basically said for every square foot above 180,000 square feet of a retail use, there had to be mixed use put in. And as a result, IKEA scaled back their proposal from a 320,000 square foot big box furniture store to 180,000 store on a couple of levels, with also housing and retail and office proposed as well. A substantially different mixed type of use. The green space is in there. I'd like to see a little bit more protection for the waterfront, but it's a good start. But basically now the Board of Aldermen has directed the zoning, and that type of direction is out of our hands unless we decide to change the zoning. Where we can come into play is first playing a moral role, I think, as these developments are proposed to, say, the planning board and commenting on them and getting public involvement. But second, the stage will come when you're dealing with the T-stop, for instance, where we may have to float bonds, the city, or we may have to authorize some sort of revenue bonds being floated. And we have to be prepared to take a hard look at the proposals, especially if it's going to mean a T-stop. And for people who are concerned, I've met with both developers for Yard 21, and they say the current economy really is not having an impact. One of the developers has been in Europe raising additional development funds.
I've got to cut you off there. When you say float bonds, what does that mean as far as what Somerville has to pay?
Well, hopefully it wouldn't have to pay anything. You would issue bonds that could be backed by a variety of things, so the interest on those bonds would be paid by the taxpayers, but it would lead to developments that would pay more in tax revenue. I mean, it would have to make sense that you would generate more tax revenue than you would having to pay the bonds. It's like a loan.
All right. Joe Curtatone, what will be the future of Assembly Square?
That's a tough question to answer in 2 minutes, but I'd like to point to some terms some people on this table use. Joyce used the word hope. I hope it's going to be bright. In the short term, I'm very concerned, as some other people on this table have said, because I think, having no surprise, the world has changed in many different ways. As far as the economy was already on a downturn. It just got pushed down the hill recently. And the window has closed, and there may be a narrow opening there. We don't know, but we're going to continue to work together as a community, as elected officials, and I will continue to do that in my role to help make sure that we achieve the goals that is in the final vision of the plan. And I have to commend community groups like Mystic View for heightening the debate. And a few years ago, there was no plan. Alderman White's correct. When we sat down with the developer when it was proposed at Assembly Square, not just Yard 21, but where the mall stands, would all be a power center. Many big box stores like you've seen down at Gateway and Everett. And that would be a diminished return for the city of Somerville, giving up such a large land. You have a lot of urban sprawl, asphalt gardens, and we made a commitment to work with the developers. We had a Cecil planning process. Was it perfect? No, but we had a roadmap. We had a lot of disagreement in the short term we should go, but everybody agreed in the final vision of the Mystic View Task Force plan and the Cecil plan, because they coincided. They were very much the same. There were some disagreements along the way. It had to do with the mall site, because one of the restrictions we were dealing with at the mall site was the Kmart lease, which has 55 years remaining on it at $4 and approximately 19 cents a square foot. And Kmart had the final veto power on many of the common areas, which really dictated what the landowner, who was tourist there and who was also a bidder on the Yard 21 site, could do with that parcel. The mayor worked out a memorandum of understanding with that landowner and developer, which would move the Home Depot over, which many of us weren't happy about, but we understood that what we tried to keep in mind were we maximize them in the short term, maximizing the plan in the short term, and would that lead to the final vision? We're trying to do that. And we have to move forward, as Alderman Favaloro said, because we're not going to get that commercial tax money for the schools, the affordable housing, and we're going to have to make some tough decisions if we don't get that money on public safety, teachers, and those programs.
I've got you cutting you off there. Do we need to get shovels in the ground right away?
In my opinion, that we need to get, we don't want to rush to get shovels on responsible development. Some of those projects in Assembly Square for the MOU, I believe we need to get shovels in the ground right away. As far as Yard 21, yes, we need to get shovels in the ground right away, not just to get the money in, but to send a message out to business community and other investors that you can do business in Somerville and we can work together on responsible development. That message is negative right now in the business community.
Whether street cleaning or plowing works, are we getting what we pay for in city services?
Well, as somebody that's had to deal with a tiny narrow street with the snow piled up and nowhere to park, I don't know. It's very difficult. It's a dense community, and I think that there need to be some more creative solutions. I'm wondering if the current way that garbage is being handled, those contracts, is necessarily the best plan. I don't know the details. I haven't had the opportunity to research that, but clearly the plan that we have is not satisfactory to a lot of residents. I think there are a lot of complaints. And the snow removal also, I think I've heard from many people that it depends what street or what part of the city you live in. So at least the impression that I've gotten as I went around to get my qualifying signatures was that people were not happy. Maybe you don't always hear from the people who are happy, but I think in a city the size of Somerville, you have to try and look at what other possible ways other communities of our size are doing. One of the things that I'm concerned about with all the city services is, are we paying a living wage? And is our money being spent wisely? And the other thing that's really concerning me, and it sort of dovetails with this, is are people who are working and doing the backbone work for the community able to afford to live in Somerville? And it makes for the whole fabric of the community to be healthy. So sometimes when people aren't doing the kind of work we want, it's not the money or the contract, it's the attitude. And maybe there's something in that mix that people feel that they're not getting the best as they work, so they're not giving their best. I don't know. I mean, I'd have to definitely do more research.
How do you change attitude?
That's a well, I think you ask people what it is that they want, what it is that they feel they're not getting, and then you try and see are there ways that those concerns can be addressed. The fact that you ask the question says, I value you. I value what you're doing in the community. And we're not just assuming because we're paying you whatever we're paying you that that's the end of it. Because work is a big part of your day, a big part of your life. So if you're not feeling like the community values what you're doing or that the people who are hiring you value you, then that energy spills out into everything that you do. So with all the services that we need, with the fire, the police, I mean, I think we have to look at are we listening to the people who are the backbone of the community and the teachers as well,
Thank you. Bruce Desmond, are we getting what we pay for in city services?
Well, I think that we always have to strive. It's like with the school systems. You always have to strive to make services better. They're not perfect. I believe that we've made great strides just recently with the police department, with the new chief, and some goals and objectives that were set with the police department. I believe our Department of Public Works is doing a great job trying to keep the streets clean and improve the parks. The parks are in good shape. Traffic and parking, always going to be a problem in a city like Somerville. I mean, it's just took me 15 minutes to park out here tonight. And I was joking when I came in and said we have to do something about that parking. But are we getting our money's worth? I believe that we have some excellent city workers that are working hard every single day for the best interest of the city. And I believe that they're sincere in what they're doing. But like any kind of a corporation, you always have to set new goals, new objectives, and try to reach those goals and objectives as you progress. And only through that process can you achieve any real excellence.
If there's room for improvement, where do you start?
I'd like to start opening those 2 bridges that are out. If we can get in touch with the state and open those up, it'll improve an awful lot with the traffic and parking. I think citywide, what we have to do is be more demanding as far as setting definite goals and objectives, measurable goals, that we can go back and go to each department head and say, this is what you had for goals this year. What have you done to achieve them? Have you achieved them? And if not, what can we do to help you to achieve those goals? And through that process, I believe we can improve the services.
Joe Favolaro, are we getting what we pay for in city services?
Somerville is 4.2 square miles. There's 77,000 people living within those 4.2 square miles and about 19,000 units of housing. Within that, I mean, is it 100%? No, of course it's not. Can they do better? Absolutely. But, you know, for the most part, you don't hear about the 99% of the time that things are done, you know, to the standard that we all expect. One of the things that Alderman Curtatone instituted this year, and myself as Vice Chairman of Finance, is really looking and putting performance objectives right in the budget. We've now been able to measure, you know, from one year to the next, sustainable goals that need to be met. And that way we can help in the budget processing if they need more resources to get the job done, or frankly, it just isn't working. We can relook on how we get things done. But also in the past year, we've hired 11 new officers for the street. We've hired a new police chief who's done a great job in the department. I think we have one of the finest fire departments in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Parking spots? Well, I think everyone, will, as you go around the table, it's very difficult. Keeping our streets clean just by the mere fact that there's so many cars. I mean, one of the things that I would like to see, and maybe as we begin to push, is, you know, that fine line about street cleaning, do you tag or do you tow? You know, maybe we have to begin to get a little bit more aggressive in issues of that nature. No one wants to tow a neighbor's car, but one of the ways you can clean the streets is by towing that car so the sweeping can get all the way down the street. Those are some of the tougher issues that you get at, but for the most part, I think we have a great workforce that works diligently, and we're not at 100%, but we're not that far from it.
Where are you on the tag versus tow issue?
Again, I'm always the one that does the politically incorrect thing. So with that, I would be on the tow side.
We know where to find you.
All right. Helen Corrigan, are we getting what we pay for in city services?
Well, if you go through a list of the services, to me, one of the top services, and it couldn't be better, and I know that another person here, Denise, would agree with me on this because I see her there all the time, is the public library. It's really a great resource, and I don't see how anybody could have a complaint about that. Joyce expressed concern about whether or not people who work for the city are earning a living wage, and I can assure you that they are, because I worked on the Living Wage Committee for 2 years, and we were able to get that passed. Does that mean they can afford to live in the city? Probably not. Unless they had a home they bought years ago or inherited or something, the average city worker cannot afford to live in this city, which is why a lot of them ask for waivers. The police department, I think the police department works fine. I've had occasions to call them. I do have a question about, which I don't expect to be answered tonight, but the city paid for a report on the police department, and the recommendation was that the police force be cut, and it was increased by 11 members. I don't understand that. The fire department, I think fire departments took on a whole new aura on September 11th when we see what people who work in the fire department do. Granted, our firemen didn't encounter anything like that horror, but they go into burning buildings, they put their lives at risk all the time, and I think they're an excellent department. As far as the streets, I have no problems where I live. The streets are kept clean. They don't get towed, but not many people seem to learn after the first couple of tickets that they shouldn't be there. But I have heard people in other parts of the city complain quite vehemently that the city was not kept clean. I think it's in the areas.
Oh, sorry, I've got to cut you off there. You mentioned the libraries. There has been talk in the past about funding renovations, expanding the libraries. Does that still need to be done?
Yes, it does. Yes. The library hasn't been upgraded in years. And my understanding was that there was money set aside a few years ago. I don't know whether it's still sitting somewhere or if that plan is just dissolved.
Okay. Bill White, are we getting what we pay for in city services?
As my response was to the school department, there's always room to improve. And tonight you've heard a lot about real important issues such as development, affordable housing, but aldermen also play a role in dealing with issues such as provision of services. If your street is not being properly picked up by the garbage, you should give your alderman a call, because we can then see to it that it's examined. Is it a problem with the driver in the truck, or was it just a one-day foul-up or something like that? A lot of the nuts and bolts things are on a day-to-day basis. But let's be serious. I think part of the problem in the city is that we have so many people who are transient, and a lot of things that are getting blamed on city services, such as street cleaning or cars parked, for instance, during street cleaning day, is really due to the fact that there's a constant turnover of a large number of people in our community. When I was a kid, it used to be you knew everybody in your street. So let's say Mr. O'Toole or Mrs. O'Toole's car was parked on the wrong side during street cleaning. Somebody would call them up and say, hey, you got to move your car. And they'd go out, they probably forgot about it, and they moved it. Now it's not only people don't know their neighbors. In three-family houses, people don't know who lives upstairs or downstairs. So we have to take that into account. One of the ways to deal with it is by trying to promote less of a transient population. And one of the things I tried to do that was with the increase of the 30% residential exemption, to reward Somerville homeowners. So people who live in the city own their own home. Hopefully they also, because they get a bit of a tax break, their rents are a little bit lower and they can rent to families, or if not families, people who are committed to staying in the community a long time. Because an example, the garbage truck leaves some garbage in the street. The time it would take somebody to go on the phone, call up and say there's a piece of garbage in the street. When I was a kid, you'd go, oh, they forgot about it. You'd go and you'd pick it up and you'd put it in the trash yourself. I mean, you don't want to have a chronic problem, but if you had a different type of community, things like that, I think, would be less of an issue.
How do you promote that type of community?
Easy. One of them is through through the residential exemption. The other one is through some of the solutions we proposed about affordable housing, I think. Part of it may be to promote some of these development proposals that would take the students off of, residents in Somerville, for instance, and have them located elsewhere. Things to open up to make it more hospitable, I think, for long-term residents. And those are just some of the examples. I think cracking down on chronic absentee landlords that are problems, hit them in the pocketbook, so maybe they decide to either sell their property or to rent it to people who are going to be there for a longer time and not create noise problems or trash problems.
Chair Curtatone, are we getting what we pay for in city services?
I think if you speak to any member of the Board of Aldermen, or school committee, or even the mayor, they'll all tell you we're always striving to get better from city services. We're never satisfied. When I speak about city services in this context, I mean like DPW, traffic and parking, your police and your fire department. Your major complaints in those areas are from traffic and parking. Everybody has a complaint about traffic and parking in every community. Somerville's so dense. And one thing I differ with my colleague, Alderman Favreau, all those people don't even live on 4.2 square miles because nobody lives in Assembly Square and nobody lives in Innerbelt. So we're even condensed in a smaller postage stamp of real estate. So we have a great traffic and parking director in Mr. Bill Lyons. Since he's come on board, he's been working closely with the Board of Aldermen, many community groups. We have some traffic study plans happening here in Union Square to deal with the traffic problem and through here in Prospect Hill, and he works closely with developers. As a Board of Aldermen, like Alderman White just mentioned, our greatest power is in the Treasury. We're the watchdogs of the Treasury, and what we try to do, in this past year as chairman of the Finance Committee, I worked with my colleagues to have goals and objectives built into the budget process. So when a department head came up, we asked them to justify your spending and go over your goals and objectives over the next year and how that relates to your spending and justifying your spending and meeting that spending over the next year. and hopefully I'll be that chair of that committee again in the near future. If not, I'll work with the next chair to make sure that process continues. So we have a continuous review on how services are going. When there's been a problem in city services, whether it's been trash pickup, we've worked as a board. We've come down hard on department heads, have department heads before the board to improve trash pickup, to improve snow removal. We've seen improvements in those areas. We've worked closely with the mayor to voice our concerns, and they've been responsive. We have to continue that watchdog role to make sure your tax dollars are being spent wisely and you're getting the most out of your tax dollars. I know one of the things I did as an alderman to help improve city service, I was one of the original advocates for the police management study to see how we as elected officials can improve ourselves in working with the police department and how we can help give the police department their essential resources necessary to perform their job at the highest task. If I could just respond to, I know Helen Corrigan had a question on why we kept the police officers in the budget and hired 14 new police officers. Well, we're trying to increase our service population by increased housing in Assembly Square and other areas. So we're going to need those patrolmen on the street. And that was the reason, one part of the study we didn't agree
If
with.
I can cut you off there. When you hire, you don't currently have more things to patrol at Assembly Square.
Right.
How do you justify those extra 11 officers and extra 11 salaries?
Well, most police studies, studies and formulas will tell you that you should have more officers in the street than what was proposed in the management study. But we're striving to increase our service population. You can see we added 42 more units of affordable housing. That's going to hopefully we'll have the ribbon cutting next year. We have the Wheatland Street projects. We are doing pockets of increased housing, and so our population will be increasing. So we need those police officers. We want to get in the street trained now.
Okay. The question, I believe the final question goes to you, Denise Provost. Are we getting what we pay for in city services?
Well, as I remember, your lead into that question had to do with garbage pickup and street cleaning, and I'd like to address those aspects first. I think one of my colleagues was correct in suggesting that we don't have a clear goal when it comes to clean streets. We do clean streets, but at the same time we don't want to offend anyone by putting them to the inconvenience of towing their cars, and so we don't have a clear goal, we don't have a clear policy to bring that goal about. If we were to insist that people move their cars, I think, to be fair, we have to offer people more of a place to put cars, which we sometimes do during snow emergencies by allowing people to park in schoolyards. It might be possible to devise a plan citywide to give people, area by area, a place to put their cars so that we can do street cleaning, which I think is a very widely desired goal. And if people can't or won't get on board and cooperate, then maybe it is fair to tow their cars. Certainly there are streets that don't get cleaned all summer because nobody moves their cars. In terms of why the streets are so dirty, I think at least in part it's because of our trash pickup contractor, with whom I'm not impressed. I see recycling and trash dumped, not just in little bits that you can conveniently pick up. I think a lot of us do that all the time, but just masses of it left and spilled. And to be fair to these workers, a gentleman said to me once, I used to despise the men who picked up the trash, but now I feel sorry for them. It's inhuman to work people that way. They're on a very fast work schedule, and I think it may make sense to bring trash collection back in-house and get more accountability. I think that there's profit being made from trash collection now, and the people who work on the street have low motivation, and it shows.
If I could follow up on that, would the city of Somerville then be imposing those kinds of conditions on its own workers?
Well, I would expect we wouldn't. We have contracts with the city unions. A lot of people have observed to me that they thought that trash pickup was actually better when city workers did it. They have rights as members of a labor union, and I think that as organized labor, they have a better attitude toward their work and they have more accountability.
Well, thank you very much. Right now we have just a few closing statements, starting with Bruce Desmond.
Well, I want to thank everyone for listening in tonight and viewing this. Thank Cat Powers and SCAT for inviting us down. I've been involved in the city of Somerville for over 20 years. It's a sincere effort to improve the city, and that's why I'm running for Alderman at Large. I ran 2 years ago. Unfortunately, I lost by only 1 vote. I'm still chasing that vote, but I feel that I have an awful lot to offer to the city. I've got a vested interest with raising my 4 children here and as a homeowner, and I would find it an honor to serve as your Alderman at Large. Thank you.
Joe Favillaro.
Yeah, I too, to SCAT and to Kat for her hosting, regretted thanks. It's not going to be, as you can tell by the efforts here, it's not going to be an easy choice. There's at least 6 other good candidates that are either trying to stay or come on the Board of Aldermen. But I think people have known me through the school committee, through now my short time on the Board of Aldermen, through all my activities. And you'll probably be getting tons of literature from all of us over the next few weeks. So I think the important message that I want to leave you with tonight is, irregardless of who you vote for on November 6th, I think the strongest message you could say about our country and the strongest weapon we have and what makes us so different is the power of voting. So what an incredible message you would send if all of you go out and vote on Election Day. Whoever the 4 of us who survive that's fine. But the message that would be sent today, because we all utilized our right to vote, would be incredible.
Helen Corrigan.
Thank you, Joe, for the kind words. And I certainly agree with your message. I don't think it'll happen in this election, but I hope that the events of the last month will make people realize what a wonderful place we live in and that people should go out and make their choices. Thanks to you, Kat, and thanks to SCAT for inviting us here. I'm asking people for their vote because I think I represent 2 constituencies that are not fully served on the board. We only have 1 woman on the board. I think there should be more women. We have no one who represents my generation. And, well, as Joe said, they're all good candidates. I feel that the older citizens in our city need someone who will represent them, who understands their concerns. I hope everybody will go out and vote on November 6th, and I ask that you give me one of your 4 votes. Thank you.
Bill White.
Thank you. As the guy who beat Bruce by 1 vote, and having gone through the agony of a recount, I'm asking everybody to please go out and vote, just so that none of us have to go through a recount, because it's an absolutely horrible experience. We didn't find out till Christmas week, but my record in the 4 years on the Board of Aldermen, I think, has established myself as a leader in a number of the important issues facing the city. I've brought a vision. I've tried to articulate it, and I've also tried to be independent and reasonable. And I think as Somerville goes forward, those are very important qualities that any elected official should have. So I would hope the voters, take that into account in making their evaluation. And there was one item I forgot to comment on, and it was when Joe Favillaro mentioned about whether cars that interfere with street cleaning should be ticketed or towed. My view is if they have a Cambridge resident parking sticker on them, then we should tow those cars. Thank you.
Joe Crittitone.
Thank you, Kat. I want to thank you and the organizers of this forum, and thank you for all my other colleague candidates here for participating. Again, my name is Joe Crittitone. I'm finishing my 3rd term as Alderman at Large. I grew up in Somerville. I have a business in Somerville. I'm a practicing attorney, and I hope to bring my experience, not only my continued experience as a member of the Board of Aldermen, but also my experience as a private businessman in the community, and bring that experience onto the Board of Aldermen and serving you for 2 more years. I have a vested interest. I own a home here in the city. I plan to live here forever. I hope to raise my family here and send my children to the public schools where I attended. Again, I urge you to go out and vote and exercise that right that you have to vote, and to continue that spirit we have in this country. And I look forward to serving you over the next 2 years on these issues that we spoke about this evening, and on many other issues that are of your concern. Thank you.
Denise Provost.
Thank you. I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to be here tonight engaged in this discussion, and to have the privilege of serving on the Board of Aldermen. As certainly the junior alderman at large. I'm still learning the job, but I think I probably have a reputation already for hands-on work and for being independent and bringing all of my skills and life experiences and points of view to the work of being an alderman and listening to everyone. I think everyone who has ever called me to ask for help can attest to the fact that I listen to everyone and I do my best for everyone. And I'd like to continue doing so long enough that I can say I've done my best and I've got something to show for it. Thanks.
Joyce the Voice.
I was thinking as I came down here this evening, what a terrific thing that I have the opportunity to attempt to run in the field of such qualified candidates, that this is the process of our government. So although I don't have the experience in this particular community, I was realizing as we talked about the accountability measures, 10 years ago, actually 20 years ago in the 70s, when I worked for the City of Portland on the Office of Planning and Development, we devised those measures. So that was many, many years ago, and I understand the importance of accountability on the budget process because I sat in on many of those hearings. I also have a radio program that I didn't mention about the Voice Mobile at Tufts, and I've been doing that community work for 10 years and another program in Alston Brighton, through which I've been able to learn about and hear and the concerns of artists, musicians, poets, authors. So I think, I have a variety of experience, life experience. I'm a good listener. I am a quick learner. And I think we need more women on the board. I think that would be very nice. I'd like to have the opportunity to be another woman on the board. I look forward to working with the progressive aldermen and to try and make the city really a fabulous place to live.
And
thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank our hosts here at SCAT. I'd also like to thank a gracious thank you to all of the candidates for aldermen at large, who I know that they've given up a good portion of their evening when they'd rather be out holding signs. Just one more word in these troubled times that we have. Please do practice democracy. For all of us here, we ask you, citizens of Somerville, to vote. Thank you very much, and good night.